Devin, or the devil incarnate. Yeah, let's get hyperbolic, shall we? Now, I've taken the old saying about not defending people when they are being harassed, and I went with this little silliness. You know how the old saying goes, first they came for the buggy whip manufacturers, but I didn't make buggy whips, so I said nothing. Then they came for the accounting clerks, but I liked VisiCalc, so again I said nothing. Then they made Devin, and there was no one left to help me. Yes, right. I mean, there's a lot of changes going on in the AI community or in the IT community. Of course, there's always a lot of changes going on in the IT community. But this does feel revolutionary, and there is definitely a threat to our jobs. Now, AI people, or I should say IT people in general, are somewhat notorious for being somewhat callous when other people's jobs are threatened. You know, oh, you'll just have to adapt, or there'll be more other jobs later, and all that kind of stuff, which always rubs me the wrong way. I hate the insensitivity that happens when, the Silicon Valley comes up with something new and just assumes everybody will adapt because they just want to make money. That just bothers me. But here it is. This is an AI tool that actually threatens developers. So suddenly it was all different, right? At least it was if you looked at the responses to the tweet. Now, the tweet came out on Tuesday, which happened to be my birthday, and as a present, Cognition Labs threatened to put my entire profession out of business. As this tweet says, today we're excited to introduce Devin, the first AI software engineer. Devin is the new state-of-the-art on the SWE bench coding benchmark. We'll talk about that in a minute. Has successfully passed practical engineering interviews from leading AI companies and has even completed real jobs on Upwork, although I feel bad for the people who hired that job. Devin is an autonomous agent. That's right. It's not an AI model. It's an agent that uses an AI model under the hood to solve engineering tasks through the use of its own shell, code editor, web browser. Here's the bottom line. It looks like Devin is essentially a script that iterates over a GPT-4 based model to generate a solution, evaluate the solution, and update the feedback and do it over again and over again and over again. And if you do that a few thousand times or tens of thousands of times, yeah, it's going to iterate to a pretty good solution. At least according to this, when they tried to resolve GitHub issues found in real-world open source projects, it correctly resolved 13.86% of them, which is about 1 in 7. Now, that doesn't sound great, although in the tweet they're saying, it far exceeds the previous state-of-the-art, which was 2% unassisted and 5% assisted. But yeah, okay, neither one of those is great shakes either. And they have a video, and they had a whole series of tweets. So, of course, a lot of the responses were panic. Oh, hey, they're coming for our jobs now. So let me give you my take on this. Now, the approach of building in a feedback loop and adjusting to the feedback has been used in AI models before. In fact, one of the most successful examples of this occurred in the chess world. When Garry Kasparov lost to Deep Blue back in '97, that was really a triumph of just brute force computation. He had to avoid openings that it would already know, try to get it into circumstances where it couldn't use its superior calculation skills. And of course, if you get into any ending with few enough pieces, it's already going to know the answer. That's really hard to beat, but that's pure calculation. There's no insight there. Later, along came the tool called AlphaZero. AlphaZero was trained in what they called a generative adversarial network. And the idea was to say, we're not going to give you any bias at all, just going to have AlphaZero play itself over and over and over again, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of times, and have it work out what works and what doesn't. Just have it figured out itself. Now, in a space with a lot of local maxima, that can get you into trouble. But according to the headlines at the time, after 4 hours, this thing was already the best computer in the world and arguably the best player in the world as well. Because computers these days can mop the floor with Deep Blue. Deep Blue would be nothing compared to those anymore. There's a lot more to say about that, but the interesting thing about AlphaZero from this point of view is that it didn't play like a computer. it kind of played like it was following interesting principles, and those principles were slightly different from the ones that grandmasters had worked out over hundreds of years. It really valued space more than regular grandmasters do. It was willing to give up material for that. It was willing to push the rook pawn all the time. This was almost funny the way it did that, again, for space considerations. And this really seemed to work for it. It would make moves to constrain the opponent's options, even if that wasn't necessarily helping its own plans at all. Just very interesting. And a lot of grandmasters changed their game based on what they learned from it, including guys like Magnus Carlsen. Very impressive. So bringing this back to Devin, that's that approach of saying, okay, solve it, see what the answer was, adjust your solution and do it again and again and again, does seem like a good idea, like a valid approach. And if you can build a feedback loop that works like that, great. My problem at first is that, I mean, with a chess game, there's a win and a loss and a draw. You know what the end result is. You have a deterministic answer. It just takes you a little while to get there. When you're trying to maximize the values of functions, even functions that are highly wavy or have a very bumpy search space and everything, that can get a little involved, and you might need to have some nonlinear jumps so that it doesn't get stuck in a local minimum or a local maximum, something like that. When you're solving programming problems, how do you know you're done? How do you know you're right? What's the evaluation function? And the evaluation function in many cases, especially in real world problems, is not just it doesn't have any bugs. It's more like, no, I like what I have. It's more elegant. It's more appropriate. It's better able to handle changes later. It satisfies the user's requirements. Okay, there's a lot of gray area in there. There's a lot of soft skills involved. So they must have picked problems where you could come up with a good, solid evaluation function and then tried to optimize it. So that's what they did. And my experience suggests that that is a good approach for problems that handle that. But even then, they only got it right 1 out of 7 times. I mean, that's not great. But we're just starting. And I quoted more or less the line from Picard in Best of Both Worlds Part 1, Star Trek Next Generation, when the Borg is coming saying, I feel like the Roman Emperor Honorius watching the Visigoths coming over the hills to sack the city, wondering if I'm truly watching the fall of Rome. You know, well, okay, for some value of the word fall, there's a lot of debate in that. Should we be worried that Devin's going to put us all out of business? Not this year. Next year? Probably not next year. There's a couple of reasons, like I'm pointing out, that maybe if there's a well-defined evaluation function that this is a good idea, but the process of giving it feedback and driving it toward a good solution is not necessarily going to be a trivial one. The other thing I didn't remember seeing anybody talk about is the expense of this thing. If they really are using GPT-4 under the hood, which it seems to suggest they are, running GPT-4 constantly, tens of thousands of times for days on end, that's not cheap. That's quite an investment. And that's not necessarily going to be cheaper than talking to a person who could solve certain problems very easily. You know, the danger, as always, with AI tools these days is not that an AI tool can do your job. It's that a manager will think an AI tool can do your job and then they can cut personnel. They're always trying to cut headcount and impress Wall Street that way, as evil as that truly is. So I don't think it's quite time yet to go for the torches and pitchforks, but it is something to keep an eye on. I expect that this approach will eventually be very favorable, and there will be parts of our job that we can delegate to a tool like this and say, yeah, come up with an optimized way of doing this part of the problem. You know, there's certain things that really are routine, and AI tools are already helping us on that, and this would take it to the next level beyond that. We'll see. When it's ready for prime time, it's not even really out yet. When it's ready, I'll talk more about it when it gets here. Let's move on to our tweets and toots. Thank you for listening to that rant.
Hey there, Des. It's time to tune in. Tales from the dark side, let's begin. Java, Kotlin, and Spring, oh my. Groovy, rattle, don't be shy. Tales from the dark side. ride. From design patterns to the latest trends, your weekly tech dose that never ends.